Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Line update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from football to the NBA, college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline is the number one sports betting source, from touchdowns to three-pointers and hat tricks. BetOnline has you covered on every game, every play, and every win. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. We are processing all of the news and information surrounding the Penn State football team, the coaching staff, the roster moves in the wake of the college football playoff. The aftermath is upon us, and there will be plenty of more news coming out today, later on this week. So stay tuned to our social and digital platforms for as many updates as we can provide you. We literally could do a podcast about every 20 minutes at the rate information is going out there. So we're going to get to the players that are departing the program, the players that are staying with the program, players that are joining the program via the transfer portal. And I want to start with a major name for the coaching staff that is leaving the program. Tom Allen, defensive coordinator, is off to Clemson to take the exact same role. My gut feeling on this one, Justin, is money talks, because it feels like a lateral move. Clemson is a comparable blue blood big program to Penn State, was just in the college football playoff. You can knock it being an ACC team, but still the national championships are pretty close in the rear view for Clemson, and a near dynastic run there under Dabo Swinney. And that feels like it's on par for their program to maybe not necessarily shell out in the NIL space for players. They tend to want to do things kind of in a similar way to Penn State. The success with honor, I guess we're going to use that as a template, but they will spend on coaches, and they've got a good reputation of spending on coordinators and assistants. So first off, Tom Allen leaving the program. What did you think about it, and how big is that void?
That's one of the things that comes with being a successful program, is having to replace those coaches, right? So what I thought about it's an interesting move to me, but it would make me like highlight. I wonder if there was any type of chemistry. Not from a dysfunctional standpoint, just a chemistry thing, whether coming from a head coach to working, under a younger head coach might be a situation, or, having someone like a Dabo Swinney where he's kind of, I'm not going to say hands off, but, he's had those head coaches in those coordinator positions almost where they're, like you said, paid like the highest paid guys in the league. And it's like a premier position to just be like the highest paid coordinator, man, not as many headaches and things of that nature. So maybe it's wonder why he left, but I think he did a great job this past year, and the past three coordinators have done a good job at Penn State. But again, I think this is one of James's strongest suits in the sense of building out a roster of coaches to be able to replace guys when things are wrong, whether they leave, whether they get fired, or whether they elevate and go somewhere else, is finding those right pieces for his staff. So I think he is elite at staff building. So not really concerned about replacing it, but good luck to Coach Allen and the crew.
I share your lack of concern about replacing it, because there are viable candidates outside the program. There are viable candidates inside the program. I thought Tom Allen did a very, very good job this year. Obviously, the personnel was there for the taking for him to capitalize on the momentum from Brent Pry to Manny Diaz. 3 different coordinators within a 4-year span. James Franklin has shown the ability consistently on the defensive side of the ball to get a solid coordinator in there to pick up where the previous one left off. So not necessarily sharing any inside information, but would you care to throw out some potential names that you like or think could be viable next defensive coordinators for Penn State?
Elijah Robinson. Got Coach Poindexter. You got Al Goins. You got just depending on which scope you want to stay in. I mean, you got Coach Smith. You got, there's a lot of different routes you can go. I mean, that defensive coordinator position is interesting at Penn State because, Coach Allen's the first one that's left that's gone to almost a lateral position, but it still sets up of having an elite defense. But he was up for, coach of the year. Assistant coach of the year award as a defensive coach. And so it's not like he had a bad season, right? At all. Actually, I think his stock as a coordinator went up. And it was just like, all right, let me go do what we need to do. So, those are the top, the guys that kind of popped in my mind, right? When you think about that. But I'm sure James has his hot list.
Poindexter would make a lot of sense. He was up for the head coaching job at Virginia not too long ago. Obviously played at Virginia, so you understand those ties. Seen a lot of people out there maybe not completely understanding the hierarchy or the experience, but saying Dan Connor, promoting him within the program to go all the way up to defensive coordinator might be quick, but obviously has very quickly ingratiated himself into the coaching staff world. Obviously is a legend within the program, so really doesn't have to do any work on that front. Good for him. Elijah Robinson was somebody that you and I talked about in the offseason before Tom Allen came on board, former Penn State football player, and I believe he's at Texas A&M at the moment. There are plenty that would love to see Danton Lynn maybe stolen from USC. I don't know if that's going to be viable.
Lynn's another great one.
So it's all like, these are great ideas. I saw some people say, go get Jim Knowles from Ohio State. And I was like, yeah, no shit. That'd be awesome. It's maybe the best program in the country in terms of it checks all the boxes in terms of personnel, compensation, notoriety. Like I'd be stunned if he left Ohio State. So there's a lot of directions that Penn State could go with this. And I think I come back to what you said. I'm not terribly concerned because I feel good about, one, the personnel that are coming back. And I also feel very strongly about James Franklin's ability to staff this position historically.
Period. And I think you bring up a lot of great points. Even it's just interesting, like when this is what kind of sometimes irks me about like coaching searches and things of that nature. Because you just named like two standing defensive coordinators that are alumni, right? And Dan Lynn, who somebody that's definitely added to that list, and then Elijah Robinson. So to even have or even, not Dion Barnes, he's his first year with his room and things of that nature. But even that, throughout Dan Connor, he's an analyst on the staff, to kind of circle it around and just kind of lacks the understanding of like taking over that defensive coordinator role. So there's a lot of viable candidates out there. Especially when you have a chance to get that brand of Penn State defense to build around, man, that really helps when you're acquiring talent. But yeah, I'm excited to see who they fill that role with.
So let's get to some of the players that are staying for 2025, as far as we know, as of the moment of this recording. All of this could change very quickly. On the defensive side of the ball, Denai Dennis-Sutton is staying. Zane Durant is staying. Zakee Wheatley is staying. Offensively, Drew Aller has reaffirmed that he is staying. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen both have established they will be back in 2025. At first blush, that is a really good nucleus to bring back for a team that made the semifinal of the college football playoff. How do you feel about that group on paper?
I feel great about it, man. Just taking advantage and opportunities of this new landscape where it's the Wild Wild West. Like you can win the stability, right? When you're having the same personalities and you know how to coach and you can continue to build on the chemistry and everything that you have. That is still a core part of this game. I know a lot of even speeches. I just came back from the convention. A lot of talks around the business are like, oh, it's transactional. And like when the wind's blowing right, west, you got to kind of get it east, because in the sense of if everyone's going transactional, the benefit or the opportunity is when you still make it transformational by building with people over time. That stability of people that want to be within the program. And that's very rare in now day and age. And it kind of reminds me of the makeup that Michigan had when they won that national title a couple of years back, regardless of the rules and all those different things. But it was an older team, right? Or that Wisconsin team that beat that Kentucky all-star team with Anthony Davis back in the day, but all older guys in the new one and done era. Just understanding that you build that culture that fits your program. And with all these guys coming back, see 4-year running backs that play together for like 2, 4-year running backs come in and leave at the same time. You got that on the defensive side with quality players. That is rare. And then you can use the transfer portal to just an addition to the program and just add those key pieces where you need them in a strategic manner and not build from this space that we're in, nowadays. So it's interesting. And I think the way Penn State has approached it, regardless of NIL and not getting into the big bidding wars and things of that nature, I think they've been going about it in a sustainable way. So it's exciting to see what this can lead to next year.
Speaking of the transfer portal, King Mack, former Penn State safety and now former Alabama safety, is back at Penn State. For those that may not recall, in the 2023 season, King Mack was a true freshman, decided to depart for Alabama. We saw what happened at Alabama this year, not necessarily falling off a cliff, but from Saban to DeBoer, definitely a change in what that program is really all about at this point in time. This is a perfect opportunity for King Mack, and it speaks to maintaining relationships and how you do business. King Mack coming back to the program when you have KJ Winston off the NFL draft, Jalen Reed also announcing he's off to the NFL draft, and Jalen Kimber, corner, not safety, but still within that defensive back room. Jalen Kimber's announced that he's off to the National Football League. Cam Miller is allegedly into the transfer portal. Tyrese Mills is no longer listed on the roster. Tyrese Mills getting some playing time at corner. So I'm surprised by Cam Miller wanting to go into the portal, because with Kimber departing, I was potentially expecting it to be a three-headed monster of Tracy, AJ Harris, and Miller to be vying for that 1, 2, 3 corner position in 2025. But getting King Mack back to potentially pair him with Zakee Wheatley, if those are your two starting safeties, there's great depth here at Lockdown U, this defensive back room. What did you think about Mack coming back? And then Miller, I think, is a big talking point. Miller's departure.
I mean, it's interesting he's coming back, right? You circle the block a little bit. Maybe the grass is not always greener on the other side. And, he's trying to find that opportunity. It's just like he obviously left in good enough standing to be able to return. So kudos to him on that, and just to have the humility to go back. So I don't think that's easy to do. And it's like, hey, I left. I thought it was better. No, this was actually a better spot. So kudos to him. Hopefully, he was always a talented player. So hopefully it comes together this second go around. Cam Miller leaving. Maybe the writing was on the wall. Man, you get that chance to be like that third or fourth corner. You get your chance to play in the big game. You kind of have a polarizing bad play in the midst of still trying to work up. The other team might be able to pay him a little bit more money than Penn State is. At this point, it's value assessment for the player. It's like, all right, they value me a little bit more. It's not going hot here. Let me roll. Good luck to him. I mean, I know he's known as a hard worker, and hopefully it pays off.
State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Other departures: Penn State wide receivers Tyler Johnson and Mekhi Flowers are no longer listed on the football roster at this time. There are a bevy of names at wide receiver that we could go through in terms of guys that have potential, could have been something. Mekhi Flowers, a guy who switched from defensive back to wide receiver. So it's not to say that these guys aren't talented, but it's just not necessarily going to affect the guys that you were even remotely seeing on the field in 2024, nor will it really affect 2025. And we're going to get into the wide receiver problem later on this week here on State of State a little bit more thoroughly. But looking at Penn State's crop of wide receivers they have coming in, the people they have on the roster now: Kyron Hudson coming in from USC, Devontae Ross coming in from Troy. There appears to be a dedicated approach to fixing this wide receiver situation. And I want to come back to something I talked about after the Notre Dame game. I saw so many people saying Marcus Higgins has had 2 years to affect this. I want to elaborate on this point for people that don't completely understand this. And Justin, you understand it far better than I, is that the wide receiver coach can't make you faster, stronger, jump higher, all that sort of stuff. Chuck Losey can work on some of those things, but the wide receivers coach is there to coach you up on the details of playing the position. So for those of you that are saying, oh, the recruiting is entirely Marcus Hagen's fault, when you're going for wide receiver talent or specific talent individually, you start with the wants of the head coach, the offensive coordinator at the time. So Mike Yurcich, let's not forget, was the offensive coordinator start 2023 when Hagens came into the program. Okay. So you just can't put this all on one person. Like, I don't understand this. But really the wide receiver issue at least appears to be being addressed from what you've heard. Do you agree with that?
Addressed by going to the portal, you mean?
Period. Like the incoming freshmen in the class of 2025, guys like Lyric Samuel and another 4-star whose name escapes me at the moment.
Yeah, well, I'm saying I don't think we've seen anything from the young guys that have come in underneath Marcus Hagens yet, to be completely honest. The guys that we've seen playing were players from the previous coaches. So when it's about recruiting, I don't think that's on him. Is it developing that talent, which he's responsible for? Yes. But you can only do so much for a receiver when it comes down to getting open and things of that nature. I played with Marcus Hagens in the NFL, so I know he's a very knowledgeable and valid coach. He had a successful career at Virginia, and so when it comes to getting those players, I do think it takes some time to work in that room. But you're also working within a offensive system that had, like you said, some inconsistency at the offensive coordinator position. So I think this year, if there's not any uptick in receiver production or things of that nature, I mean, I think you got to start looking at it. But he's a great coach, and yeah, valid. I don't think that's the bullseye here, especially because that becomes the case every time a receiver coach comes in. It's like, you're kind of behind the 8 ball, and then you're behind the 12, and it just keeps going back, and it's just like, I think it's a program situation to identify and figure out this receiver thing, because it's a glaring weakness at this point.
We'll talk about that a little bit more later on this week. Kobe Howard was the other 4-star freshman. His name escaped me. He's on his way into the program. Other stuff within the transfer portal, Penn State did bring in offensive lineman TJ Shanahan from Texas A&M, multiple game starter this past year for the Aggies. So a guy with some experience at the SEC level and coming into an offensive line room where, again, at the time we're recording this, there's decisions to be made for a handful of offensive linemen for Penn State. But you do expect your nucleus to be relatively intact. Wormley has a decision to make, but you've got a lot of ability there that you could see back in 2025. Shanahan, don't know if there's expectations for him to step in and start immediately. And that's not necessarily something that, like, we saw that from Hunter Nourzad, the transfer from Cornell, stepped in and immediately started at center for Penn State. But also historically, Justin, I haven't seen an offensive lineman that Penn State's brought in. They're like, we're expecting you to start. We're expecting you to compete, cross-train, and learn. But never is a situation where they're like, hey, we need to plug this position and this guy's in at offensive line.
You mean finding those guys, or has that not been a situation?
I don't feel like that's been the situation for Penn State in the transfer portal era. Not necessarily like grabbing a guy and like, this is our starting offensive lineman. You know,
I think that goes to the philosophy of recruiting and development. And I think that's a safer, more sustainable way, right? You get your best guys like Ola, and I mean, not Ola. Yeah. Although Fontenot, he comes through and he's like a recruit that develops underneath the program. It's kind of hard to find those plug and play left tackle guards unless you're going to be paying top dollar. And, you know, with that position, you need depth and quality. So, I mean, you can find some quality guys that you can develop and see what happens, and maybe not have to get into the bidding war for those glaring holes. But again, I think that's a more sustainable piece of building that position group than it is trying to find lottery ticket winners in the transfer portal. So kudos to the program on that.
Adding Shanahan to the mix from the transfer portal. Also, Penn State added Owen Waffle from the transfer portal, former defensive lineman from Michigan, is considered an edge, is from Princeton, New Jersey. He was initially committed to Notre Dame and then decommitted, but changed his commitment to Michigan, had a bevy of offers from within the Big Ten, 3-star recruit. So I don't necessarily have a good feel on whether or not this guy is going to step in and be a starter for Penn State. There are a lot of questions now along the defensive line. Abdul Carter is off to the NFL, which should have surprised absolutely no one. Amin Vanover is done with the program, out of eligibility. You get Zariah Fisher back this year, but just so many injuries in terms of just what he's dealt with throughout his career, and as a more of an undersized defensive end. Deny Dennis Sutton is going to be the queen piece, so to speak, of that defensive end room. Max Granville, as a freshman, was the third down backup for Abdul Carter late in this season. So is he a guy that steps in? Anai White, transfer from Texas A&M, another Aggie. Anai White had limited experience at Texas A&M. So to assume that he's going to be a starter opposite Deni Dennis Sutton would be a leap. So there's going to be plenty of competition in that room. And then backing up that defensive tackle room, I think is going to be really important. Devon J. Thomas is done in terms of eligibility. Zane Durant being back. I feel like that's going to be a position we're going to have to watch for the next 8 months to really see what this defensive line is going to be. But again, I don't expect a big drop off with Dean Barnes' unit.
Absolutely not. I don't expect a big drop off anywhere on this team, to be completely honest. I'm hoping for an uptick on the receiver side and everywhere else to increase a little bit with a year of maturity and development. So next year is going to be interesting.
I know going into 2023, everybody was saying, oh, we could compete for the national championship. And I think I got caught up in that hype like a lot of people. And once the season started to play out, it was like, hey, you just kind of understood this was a good team, but they weren't at that level. And to see this past year where you and I talked about it, was like, hey, this was a show me, prove it year for Penn State football. They proved it. Now the expectations for James Franklin and this staff and this team is to get back to the college football playoff and to credibly compete for a national championship. And I think it's very reasonable based on the players that we understand at the time of this recording are going to be back for Penn State in 2025, that yes, Penn State can credibly compete for a national championship in 2025, but so much has to happen between now and then. So thank you for joining us on this week's episode of State of State. Later on this week, I'm going to have another episode for you covering Penn State's wide receiver problem. And we're going to go more in depth as to what Penn State is doing to correct that for the 2025 season. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by BetOnline and by Blue White Outfitters.